There we go. Oh, there we go. Lisa, come on. Tara, come on in. That one and that one. That one. Okay, you guys ready to go? Because we got a lot of stuff to get through here. So it's 10 minutes. And I want to thank Mark for giving us the nice room. You guys remember the communist cell upstairs? We're all in with the ceiling that you just sit up, you bump your head up there. It's so awful. So they finally gave us a nice room. Isn't this nice? Isn't this a nice room? Thank you. Because I whined and bitched and moaned and complained so much that he finally just wanted to shut me up, I think. Okay, what am I... PowerPoint presentation. First off, welcome to the 21st century, the second decade. I don't have to write on a clipboard that falls down or anything like this. I'm actually going to show you pictures of all kinds of amazing things. The only thing, I'm going to pump one thing while I'm here, and this is this stuff, this PXP. Have you guys heard of this stuff? This stuff is great. I was like type 2 diabetic, and I've lost like 20 pounds already on this. This is it's an alpha PXP that's known as an alpha glycan. It's small enough to feed the body at a cellular level. It's a polysaccharide X-peptide rice product, and I've been taking like a little scoop of this in water like 3 times a day, and it's amazing. I have really bad blood sugar that like bounces up and down, and I used to get really bad sugar cravings, and I would eat in the middle of the night. I'm one of those people whose stomach jumps out of his body and runs to the refrigerator and gets them all fat while you're asleep. I'm that guy, that Ambien guy that like walks and eats all the food. You can't understand why he's all fat in the morning. I'm slim trimming down. It's this stuff. I'm telling you. I haven't. The most exercise I get is jumping to conclusions, and I'm really good at it, actually, really good. Wow, there's a conclusion that needs to be jumped to. That's an Olympic sport, by God. So PXP, this stuff is great. My buddy Thomas Morton, my brother from another mother, is selling it at booth 207. I'm not even hucking it here, but I just... my wife is hooked on this stuff. My friends come over to get, to mooch it off me. So it's really, really great. So this is this PXP. Once again, my family has been in the health food business since 1974. I used to have a couple of natural fast food restaurants that I owned and sold in the early 80s. I've been through everything. I've been through, everything from Soylent Green, which was made out of people, which was really people. And great movie, wasn't it? Right up there with like Planet of the... I just watched Omega Man the other day too, which is really cheesy. But this Alpha PXP is great stuff. So if you guys are interested in weight loss, in sugar balancing, in appetite control, in all the good things, this is great because it feeds everything in the body. So there you go. So that's that. So that's my only pitch for a product for the whole time we're here. All right, let's just get rolling with this. If you want to turn the lights out here, and can you guys hear me okay with the mic? Because we don't have a podium here, so should I do it like this? Okay, I will hold it like this, just so you guys have it. All right, here we go. So this is our PowerPoint presentation. Sean's talk is about 2 hours. There you go. So if you wanted a topic actually on the talk, it's usually always kind of nice to start it with something kind of neat and something kind of spiritual. So so what I'd like to do is, oops, just click back. Sorry, we're gonna start with this. Okay, if you guys just want to close your eyes for just a second, and we're just gonna take a deep breath. Put your feet flat on the floor if you can, because we're just gonna do a little blessing here as we start out. And O cosmic birther of all radiance and vibration, soften the ground of our being and carve out a space within us where your presence can abide. Fill us with your creativity so that we may be empowered to bear the fruit of your mission. Let each of our actions bear fruit in accordance with your desire. Endow us with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish. Untie the tangled threads of destiny that bind us as we release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. Do not let us be seduced by that which would divert us from our true purpose, but illuminate the opportunities of the present moment. For you are the ground and the fruitful vision, the birth, power, and fulfillment, as all is gathered and made whole once again. And all God's children say, Amen. There we go. Okay, so we just start out with that. That is the Lord's Prayer, actually directly translated from the Aramaic. Not from the Aramaic to the Greek, to the Latin, to English, but directly from the Aramaic. All right, we're going to start with this. We know all about this thing. This is the Mayan calendar. This is actually known as the Aztec sun disk. And the Aztec sun disk, going through this, and actually, didn't we have the lights out? The lights in the front out here? I don't know if we can do these in the front. Okay. Is that a little better? Oh, there you go. Is that better? Okay, good. Okay, this is the Aztec sun disk. I may have to lower this down just a little bit. But the key to this disk here is the tongue actually on the guy that looks like Barack Obama here in the center, right there. And And he really does, actually. He's got the ears. See the ears on either side right there? So here's the tongue. And what does the tongue represent? The tongue represents that the age we're in is the age of flint. And the tongue is represented as a hard flint, which means we're in an age where people are talking a bunch of crap, talking a bunch of lies. This is the politician right here. This is why I joke about this being Obama. Because this is the center of the politician, because he's a guy with the tongue that hurts and wounds and creates war and conflict with the tongue, with lies, with all the things that are going on. So this disc, which actually ends in 2012, then is replaced by the next final 13 what's called the universal underworld, the 13-year period, which is then replaced by a 13-year phase of the Jaguar, which is then the next thing that's coming up. Now, the wheel, I'm sorry, it's not dark enough in here quite yet. What the wheel is it's a wheel within a wheel. You've actually got 13 tons against 20 back tons against a larger wheel. I'm not going to go into the whole explanation of this. The bottom line is that what the calendar is based on is a natural cycle of 13 and 20. You have 20 fingers and toes, and you have 13 main joints in the body. And so in the 13 and 20, as this rotates with this wheel, which rotates with this wheel, which rotates with a larger wheel, creates this clockwork actually design of the cosmos and the universe. Now, one of the things that most people are really terrified of coming up in 2012 is going to be what's going on with the sun. The sun is going into something called cycle 24. Now, cycle 23 started in 1999, actually started between late 98 and 1999, and usually sun cycles occur, really raging sun cycles, happen every 11 years and every 22 years. In that period of time, you have a magnetic shifting of the poles. It's not unusual. Sometimes it happens every 11 years, but it usually happens every 22 years, where the southern pole and the north pole actually shift, and you actually have a polar shift of the sun, usually in 22-year cycles. The weird thing about this is that the solar cycle of 11 years and 22 years usually lasts anywhere between 6 months and about 18 months or so, and then the sun calms down again. Cycle 23 was unprecedented for the fact that the cycle lasted from 99 until almost 2007, I think it was. Then the sun went totally quiet. The sun went into a quiescent period in which there was not, you see these sunspots here and these what are called CMEs, coronal mass ejections? There was not one of these on the sun for close to 520 days. And the sun began to activate in cycle 24 starting up about last September when the sun started going crazy again. Now these coronal mass ejections, as you can see, that's us right there. That gives you an idea of the approximate size of the Earth and the approximate size of these coronal mass ejections. And what astronomers are most worried about is that when cycle 24, which is starting now, reaches its peak in 2012 to 2014, that one of these actual flares will actually strike the planet. And if that was to occur, it would be a really bad day. And of course, this is stuff from the movie 2012. And what was the theory behind 2012? That there were neutrinos that were actually bombarding the Earth, that were actually heating up the center of the Earth, that was causing all kinds of death and all kinds of destruction. This is really dark. Could you? I don't know if there's some way to brighten this up, or if there's maybe just turn the lights off. Is it this light here? No, that's not a lot better. Is it possible to actually turn this up or something as far as this goes? Because this is really not. There should be a way to actually brighten it somehow.
I don't think so.
No, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah. Unless we bring it a little closer, maybe.
Okay, actually, yeah. If you close that window there, that might help. That's okay.
Sean, it's hard to hear you, especially when you're facing...
Sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. It's hard to work all this stuff all at the same time here, so it's... you guys don't have a podium or a lectern or anything, do you? I know it's be hard to bring this. Could you please? That would be great if they got one in here. I'll talk at you this way. I'll make sure that you guys hear me, and I'll be aware of the mic because I'm working a bunch of different things here. Actually, let me do this, and let me do that, and I'll put this down. All right, so here we go. So once again, if you want to hit the lights... So 2012, obviously, according to the movies, looks like a pretty bad day. If you actually look at, that's a really dark one. But this is an actual live shot of what downtown Los Angeles looks like 2 or 3 days ago, right there. I actually learned that you can actually outrun a pyroclastic volcanic flow if you just have the right Winnebago, actually. So the interesting thing about this is that if you actually bought yourself a limousine or a Winnebago, you can actually outrun the end of the world. So I think that's a good thing. So here's downtown Los Angeles. Here's all the stuff with 2012. These are the disasters that they were expecting with what will actually occur when supposedly these neutrinos, and now what's happening? Why are the lights up? There you go. Okay. It's very romantic now in here. So anyway, what just happened? I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. There we go. There's my house right there. So there you are. All right. Now, what we're talking about, this is like too dark now. Just turn the lights up in the back so we're done. We're done. There we go. Not quite so much. Turn them down just a little bit.
I'm going to bring a light in, which we could just keep a separate.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's fine. All right. So, what is this all going to do? What is this all going to do to the human mind? Because what the Mayan calendar and the Aztecs are telling us, and what's going on with the sun, is that we are now activating sections of the human brain. And so if radio waves are affected by the differing positions of the planets, then that means that they have a direct effect on what's happening to the mind. Since we're the microcosm of the Earth, the idea here is that Gaia, as a planet, is a living organism, and that this organism is actually evolving along with us. That as the Earth itself begins to evolve, the brain actually begins to evolve. And as the brain evolves, why can't our consciousness? And why can't our consciousness evolve actually in tune with the galactic spirals and patterns of everything else that's going on? This is the entire point of the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar is a calendar of consciousness. It actually doesn't really list points in the sky. I mean, it takes them into account, but it has to do with where we are in our evolution as we move forward. And so, I don't know why this stuff is not up here. You guys remember this ride at Disneyland? It's too high here, but remember this ride at Disneyland? Remember Adventures Through Inner Space? So that's in essence, yes, what are we doing? Why is everybody walking around here?
Well,
that's in essence what we're doing. Yeah, okay, go ahead. You can bring that down. This evil thing. I should have just used the other projector. Now what's going on? I feel like I'm in high school and this is the AV team that's coming in and fix everything. All right, now it's way over there. All right, so we decided to conduct our own experiments and gather our own data. So they set up an experiment. This is my buddy Richard Hoagland and Michael Barra. They set up an experiment to record the effects during the Venus transit of the sun in 2004. Now, when the Venus transit happened on June 8th, of 2004, a transit is effectively an eclipse. And what an eclipse does is that this is an actual picture of the 2004 Venus transit. The planet Venus moving across the face of the sun has a unique point to it, because what does the planet Venus represent? First off, it's the morning star. It's one of the most sacred objects to the Mayans, to the Aztecs, to all the Mesoamerican people. Why? Because it represents the white buffalo calf woman. It represents the coming of the feminine Messiah. It represents the re-empowerment of the female nature. And why is that particularly important? It's important because if you divide the brain in half and you have the masculine dominant side of the brain on the left-hand side, which is the side of the brain that's only good for measuring things. It's good for height, width, breadth, and a measurement of time. And it puts things into linear order. It actually takes, we see everything upside down. This is the side of the brain that actually inverts things so it's right side up, and then takes things and puts things in a logical, rational order so that our society and our civilization makes sense. That's not really how we perceive things. So, for example, in just the first 10 minutes of us goofing around with all this stuff here, you've been to the future, you've been to the past, you've been to high school, you've seen what technology from the 1940s looks like. You've thought, oh, I have to do this, I've got to go there, I've got to pick up the kids, I've got to eat, where am I going to go, why is this guy so boring, et cetera, et cetera. And so, as the Venus transit actually, oh, thanks. Yay, I have a podium. Thank you so much. Thanks. Coolness. All right, thanks. Good. Now I can hang on to this and do all this stuff all at the same time. All right, there we go. All right. There, better? Okay, hands free. All right, there we are. So now we're all good. Now I can put all this stuff over here. Talk about all this junk here. There we go. So I'm all happy snappy. All right. So as the sun begins to transit Venus, what Richard Hoagland's experiments saw was that the minute when the Venus is on the edge, right at the edge of the sun, that he used a series. I mean, actually, he used an old Bulova watch from I think the 1950s that had a magnetic diode in it that began to actually flux, and he went down to the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan in Mexico to do this experiment. And what he found is that when Venus, the edge of Venus, began to just hit the lip of the sun, all the dials just started going crazy. In other words, a measurable effect on the planet. And what this does is it means it's directly affecting not only the brain, but the limbic system as well, and realigning what's going on in the right hand side of the brain. So the fascinating part about the Venus transit is that not only does it have a physical effect on us on Earth, but this transit specifically, and I'll show you this is the actual transit of Venus across the sun here. The transit, as it came through across the bottom part of the sun, this is the ecliptic where the Earth moves here. As it came through, you can actually see that as they measured the Venus transit contact times, that it went crazy as it's coming in here. It went totally nuts here. Actually, the lines and graphs started going crazy here. It was at its greatest in the center, and then just as it came out the other side, it went nuts again over this way. This date and the 2012 date for the Venus transit are two of the most significant points in the Mayan calendar because they talk about the return of the feminine aspect of Quetzalcoatl. Now, when we talk about the era of 2012, this is actually where the planet is now. So 5000 AD, we'd be approximately here. And so what all this means in the galactic alignments, this is the era of 1000 BC, this is 2012 AD, and this is where we're approximately going to be in 5000 AD or so, as far as the galactic alignments go. Also in 2012, we're right dead center of the galactic plate, and after December 21st of 2012, we'll actually be at the bottom of this. This is actually flipped over, so you can look at it as the top or the bottom, but we'll be from here to here, actually above the galactic plate after 2012. So if you're actually looking at the Milky Way galaxy and where the sun actually goes through, this is where the ecliptic of the sun was in 3000 BCE, before Common Era, 1500, and on 2012, you see this kind of, I mean, the only way you can describe it is how the Mayans described it as a vaginal rift in the universe, that the actual dark rift in the center of the cosmos actually occurs dead center there, what they call the central bulge. Now remember, in 2012, it's the first year that the sun contacts this, in other words, it's the first time it eclipses the central bulge of this incredibly powerful dark hole or black hole that actually sits at the center of the galaxy. So the sun, acting as a lens, is about ready to amplify, I guess you could call it billions of watts of power coming directly from the center of the galaxy here. And each year, great, now this doesn't work now. So each year, as the sun moves, as the sun moves further and further and further along this ecliptic, we're going to be further into this particular galactic rift. So each year, we move further and further and further up this dark rift, and this power from the center part of the galaxy actually gets stronger and more powerful. So there's no question that when the sun rises over the horizon on December 21st of 2012, at 11:11 Greenwich Mean Time, that something physical could happen. The question is, will it actually happen? And that's the big question. So with the galactic equator on the solstice, once again, here's the galactic equator in 1998. You can actually see how the winter solstice sun is actually shifting. The cosmos was actually more aligned, the sun was more aligned in 1998 than it was in 2012 along the galactic equator. However, it will be eclipsing, and this is what's interesting about 2012 as well. You have two major eclipses of the sun. You have the Venus transit. By the way, the Venus transit happens. It happens in 2004. It happened in 2004. It's going to happen again in 2012, and then it does not happen again for another 171 years. So it gives you an idea of all the unique things that are actually going on with what's happening. Now, but something else happened too. Now remember, we have what's called the precession of the equinoxes, and that inexplicable wobble on its axis that all spinning systems have, including stars and planets, experience. So what happens is that every 25,920 years, the Earth actually, like a top here, actually rotates around in a circle for the precession of the equinoxes, which is why the equinoxes come up differently on different areas and locations. Now, this graph is very interesting because there's a series of glitches right here. For example, you see in December 1998, right here in December 1998, moving through 1999. Here's what's called the Y component here with the X component. I'm not going to bore you with this. The point is you need to look at that right there. What that is between 98 and 99 is a shifting of the poles. Not the radical shifting of the poles of the planet flipping over, but you got to give some street cred to Edgar Cayce. Because Edgar Cayce said that in 1998 and 1999 that there would be a shifting of the poles or a new consciousness would take hold, would take place among the people of the world. Well, people don't realize that the North Magnetic Pole actually has 3 poles of energy, that it's actually got one pole, second pole, and another pole, that there's 3 actual North Poles. And that what the planet did is that this is an actual skip in the rotational cycle of the Earth, where the Earth went 5 degrees to one pole, 5 degrees to another pole, and between 1998 and 1999, as Edgar Cayce predicted, the poles actually did shift. Only 5 degrees, but it actually shifted here, here, and here, from one pole of magnetic north to another pole to a third pole, and this was the actual graph that actually shows the magnetic shift of the pole at that particular period of time. Now, between December 98 of 2000, you also had a major earthquake in Turkey. This was a very, very active time for earthquakes all around the world. Right here about August of 1999, right after the eclipse was when you had the earthquake in Turkey that killed about 40,000 people. You had earthquakes in Chile. You had some major, major earthquakes all around the world. And so here's a closer look at what in essence is a polar shift or a polar wobble that happened at approximately the same time in December. This, by the way, this date in 1998 is when the sun directly aligned on the ecliptic, and this is the December 23rd date of 1998. There's another one of these about ready to happen in 2012. And we theorize, for example, the one other time that you had this particular jump in the planetary rotational field was directly before the earthquake in Sumatra. You guys all remember that quake, the big Asian tsunami that wiped out most of Phuket in Thailand. There were, and this is interesting because on the news they finally reported that after the Chilean earthquake was an 8.8, I believe it was. Was it 8.8 or was it finally put down as an 8.9? I believe it was an 8.8, was the Chilean earthquake. ABC News actually reported that the planet skipped a beat, did one of these actually after that earthquake. Did you hear that on the news? That the rotational cycle of the planet actually skipped by a fraction of a second or so. Now, here's the question. The question is, did the rotational skip of the planet happen just before the quake, or did it happen just after the quake? Because the evidence showed in the Sumatran earthquake that the actual planet skipped a beat, the heartbeat of the planet, if you will, skipped a beat, which then led to the Sumatran earthquake actually occurring. So, which happened first, the chicken or the egg? This is, right here, this actually shows you. Here's the actual point. This is the shifting of the poles. Remember I was telling you this is the spin axis spirals counterclockwise in a 7-year track. Right here, this is where the magnetic pole wandered to, point 1, point 2, and point 3, showing that Edgar Cayce once again was correct, that in fact the poles did shift between 1998 and 1999. Now again, the question is, are we going to be consumed by the sun's hyper-excited magnetic field, these belches of super-destructive solar flares? Because what astronomers are telling us is that their biggest fear is that if there is a massive solar flare of some kind, that it will create what's called a Z-pinch. And a Z-pinch happened, the last time a Z-pinch, well, I'll give you an example. The last time a major solar flare licked the outside atmosphere of the Earth, it blacked out Canada in 1989. I'm not sure if you remember the Canadian blackout of 1989. Of course, it's Canada, so nobody noticed. But it's like, hey, we better go to candles like we usually have. So, and those Canadians, they're really nice people, but they turn into vicious monsters once you put a hockey stick in their hand. You ever notice that? Damn those people beating our American team. So, yeah, twice. Yeah, exactly. So the last time it licked the outer atmosphere, and what happens is that the energy from and let's just pretend this is the Earth here, the energy from a coronal mass ejection here actually hits the planet at the top and the bottom because the Earth actually has what's called the Van Allen radiation belts that actually protect us here. So when this comes in, it goes in through the top and it goes through the bottom, which means that you have problems in places like Canada and Australia when things begin to black out. This is what a Z-pinch is called. Now, we're now finding in Australian archaeology that apparently 14,500 years ago, there was a solar flare that struck the planet, that we now have all kinds of aboriginal artwork and all kinds of pottery and all kinds of cave drawings and all kinds of interesting things actually showing this event occurring at that time. Science is now telling us that apparently this Z-pinch wiped out everybody on the planet with the exception of about 2,000 people that were sporadically spread all across the earth. So all of you, ladies and gentlemen, are supposedly directly descended from the 2,000 people that were left from the last Z-pinch event from 14,500 years ago. You can see direct evidence of this for anybody that travels through Arkansas extensively. So, yeah, and Kentucky, and people say, "Oh, I want to see America." I'm like, "No, you don't." Yeah, there's some good parts, and you know what I want to do? I want to write a travel book, and the whole first 16 pages will be completely blank, and it'll say, "And now you've seen North Dakota." So there you go. So anybody's ever been there. So using a series of observations of the physical effects recorded as the sun moves along the plane of the ecliptic, we can now map out the pathway of what is called a torsion field. In other words, here's the sun. Here's the Earth when it comes through. This is where the sun is, and this is the ecliptic here. Here's galactic center now. This is where the sun is currently on December 21st of 2012, December 21st of 2010. But as it moves in, this is where it's going to be as it continues to move through in 2012. So on December 21st, it's there. January 1st, it's there. January 10th, it's there. January 19th, it's there. So this is the alignment as it gets closer and closer and closer to galactic center, which is only about 2 years away. Now, the idea is that here we have galactic center, and that galactic center is giving us a pulse of energy or an effect that actually comes from the black hole. And remember, the galactic center is an immensely powerful. It's a black hole that's approximately a light year across. I can't even tell you how many millions and millions of miles. That is now pulsing, because the interesting thing about the universe is everything comes in tubes and spirals. So every December we're being hit as we move into January and February or so. We're actually being moved into this area where we're being hit by energy from the center of the galaxy. I think it's also, my theory is, it might also be the reason why we're having more and more earthquakes. You notice how the earthquakes are getting bigger and bigger in November, December, January, February, because of this effect. That here's the sun, here's the torsion field of galactic center. But there might be something else out there as well. And the challenge is that there's a lot of people who are talking about Planet X. You guys probably have heard of Planet X, right? Planet X may or may not be a 10th, or some people say 12th planet in the cosmos. This was something that was put forth by Zecharia Sitchin and the majority of his work. But even Sitchin says that if Planet X was actually coming around, that it was not going to actually be here until somewhere around the 29th century. So it's a really long ways away. However, astronomers now believe that Planet X could be a dormant sun or a brown dwarf of some kind that's out there in space, that's about 500 astronomical units away from us, and that this is a coronal mass ejection that occurred in 1998. This is June 2nd of 1998. But you can see that when the solar flares occur, see how the energy actually comes out in a torsion field? Now, this is going to be very interesting as we move along, because this is how energy not only comes out straight, but it spins as it actually comes out. That's the physics of this. So now, if we look at the ecliptic of where the sun's going to be, we look at galactic center here, we look at the axis of where galactic center actually comes through, it means that on December 21st, well, actually it's going to move into 2012 here, but it means that we're not going to be hit actually with the full force of galactic center until sometime around 2013. So it gets worse, or should I say, not worse, but more intensified actually each year. Now, in 1982, the IRAS satellite detected a large cold object in the constellation of Orion, and they first reported it as about 50 billion miles away, or exactly 550 astronomical units. Then they swiftly retracted that estimate and changed it to 50 trillion miles away, which didn't make any sense at all. And so when we asked some of these scientists who found this object, Dr. Jerry Neubauer of JPL said he didn't remember anything about actually finding another object in space. But here it is. Mystery heavenly body discovered. A heavenly body possibly as large as the planet Jupiter and so close to the Earth that it would be part of the solar system has been found in the direction of the constellation of Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the U.S. infrared astronomical satellite. So mysterious is the object that astronomers do not know if it is a planet, a giant comet, a nearby protostar that never got hot enough to become a star, a distant galaxy so young that it is still in the process of forming its first stars, or a galaxy so shrouded in dust that none of the light can cast its star ever gets through. All I can tell you is that we don't know what it is, said Dr. Jerry Neubauer, IRS chief. We called him and asked him about this, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. Even though this was in the paper, and this is what he said at JPL. Director of Palomar Observatory for California Institute. The most fascinating explanation of this mystery body, which is so cold it casts no light and has never been seen by optical telescopes on Earth or in space, is that it is a giant gaseous planet as large as Jupiter and as close to Earth as 50 billion miles. While that may seem like a great distance in earthbound terms, it is a stone's throw in cosmological terms, so close, in fact, that it would be the nearest heavenly body to Earth beyond the outermost planet Pluto. If it is really that close, it would be part of our solar system, says Dr. James Hook, Cornell's University Center of Radiophysics. There's Planet X. And it's possibly a twin to our sun. And if you actually take a look at, and this is the Mayan calendar, this is actually Chichen Itza here, and this is where this is the sun disk. Here's where the Aztecs were, and this is Teotihuacan, and these are the Aztec pyramids of the sun and the moon here. And then you have here, these are the Mayans, and this is where Chichen Itza and Tikal and everything is here. And these are the various ecliptics as they're moving across the areas in the Yucatan coming up in 2012. So this is Chichen Itza. And Chichen Itza is interesting because each year, as the energy, or should I say each May 20th, there's a serpent that actually comes down the face of Chichen Itza. In other words, it's cut in such a way so that as it actually comes across the top of the ecliptic here every May 20th or so, I'm sorry, not May 20th, it actually comes down on the solstices. So that would be June. And as it's cut in such a way so that as the sun comes down, it actually looks as though a serpent is slithering down these steps and actually coming down out of this, which is the serpent of Quetzalcoatl, which is the serpent of wisdom being bestowed upon the planet. Now, this is Tikal. And it's a 9-story cosmic pyramid that's symbolic of the 9 underworlds of creation. And each of these develop a certain level of consciousness and all reach their completion. Now, this is Carl Kalaman. And let me tell you that there's a debate going on between Dr. Kalaman, who believes that the end date is October 28th of 2011, which so happens to be Hillary Clinton's birthday. Conspiracy? Yeah, it's just a coincidence. But what he says is that the universal underworld, in other words, the tower at the top, ends in 2011. That's impossible, and here's why. There is so much stuff that occurs in 2012 with 2 eclipses, with the Venus transit, with the alignment, that what I think he's doing is that I think he's taken the Aztec sun disk, which does end October 28th of 2011, and here's the concept. Does life begin at birth or conception? All right, some people say birth, some people say conception. My attitude is that the October 28th, 2011 date is some kind of conception point. It's the sperm hitting the egg. It's the frat boy meets the sorority girl. It's it's a case of beer at some kind of party. And right here, October 28th of 2011 is something that has to do with the splitting of the zygote that then culminates on the December 21st, 2012 date, happening sometime later. Now, the other interesting part about this is that each one of these levels, each one of these levels at Palenque represents a different level of consciousness. Now here, there's for the first level, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 levels that lead to the universal underworld until you're finally at the pyramid or the temple at the top. What each one of these levels represents is a week made up of 7 cosmic days and 6 cosmic nights. Each one of these weeks, for example, this week on the bottom lasts approximately 16.4 billion years, which is how long the Mayans think that the universe has actually been in existence. As we go down, this is 16.4 billion years, this is 80 billion years. The weeks get shorter and shorter and shorter as we go along. But you can see that it's a development of consciousness. It goes from cellular to mammalian to family to tribal to regional to national, to planetary, to galactic, and finally universal. You see how each one of these has to do with an aspect of sharing, and each one of these has to do with inner relationships of, I guess you could say, love and affection, and at the same time they all have to do with ever-expanding fields of communication. Does that make sense? So here you have cells beginning to communicate to survive, that then form mammals that communicate to survive, that then form family units, tribal units, regional units, national units, planetary units, galactic units, and finally, so for example, the planetary day of the 7 days and 6 nights, planetary day was about 20 years or so 20 years for a day and about 20 years for a night. This is the galactic underworld that we're in now. This whole area at the top is from approximately 1999, January, February of 1999 through 2012, because now everything's hyperactivating. So each step of the pyramid gets faster, 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 faster. The universal underworld here, which is the final level of Palenque, this is the final 260 days, lasting from approximately, from February of 2012 to December 21st of 2012. That means that in 260 days, in that period of time, we are going to have an activation that is so strong, that is so powerful, that is so dynamic, that the bottom line is that this is a culmination of over 16.4 billion years of evolution. 16.4 billion years of evolution that takes place in 260 days in 2012. That gives you an idea of how much responsibility and how much we actually have ahead of us. Also, this just shows you the 16.4 billion that you have the initiation of matter to cellular, complex life, individual, monkeys forming families, human beings are tribal, spoken language comes with cultural, writing comes with national, industrialism comes to planetary, IT revolution comes to galactic, and then final transformation comes to cosmic, of an awareness of where we are in the universe as opposed to just where we are in our own heads and in ourselves. Now, a lot of people are kind of interested in this. I'm sorry it's so dark. Here's another photo of it. But this is the actual Dresden Codex. This is the Dresden Codex here, which is in the Mayan calendar, is the last phase. This is basically what happens in 2012. This here is the final. Now, let me see. Let me give you a little history behind this. The history behind this is that there were 25,000 different written forms of communication and 25,000 books that gave us the history of language, of the planet, of the universe, that foretold the future. There were codexes on herbology. There was cures for virtually every disease. And what happened when the Spanish got there? They burned all of them. And there was only 4 codexes that actually survived. This is called the Dresden Codex. There's the Dresden Codex, the Paris Codex, the Madrid Codex, and the the New Jersey Codex. The last one, it's where all the codexes were actually stored when you actually take a look at it. This is the one that's the most interesting, because here you have the black god of the underworld here, and on top of his head is this evil parrot that's called Seven Macaw. And Seven Macaw is like this trickster guy that's always playing tricks on humanity. What this is that this is a serpent. Actually, there's a leg right there, and what he's doing is he's vomiting out this torrent of water down upon the earth, and this is in essence the destruction in 2012, is that this sky serpent here is actually vomiting out all of this water all across. So it looks like, according to this codex, that the end of the world actually comes through waves and waves and waves of water, and that's what happens in 2012. Now, this is Dr. Carl Johann Kalaman, and his books are The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. And the Mayan calendar is a little dry, a little dull, but if you get the Mayan calendar, the Transformation of Consciousness, it's a really fantastic book. And this is where he actually divides the days and nights of the calendar, moving along in the galactic wave movement. That it comes up, there's positive active energy that comes up during the days, and then it goes into sort of quiescent reactive passive energy. So here we have. This is interesting because Kalaman got a lot of street cred because he predicted at the beginning of the economic downturn that at night 5 here that we would see a global collapse of material civilization as we know it. And Kalaman hit it almost right on the head. Kalaman thought it was going to happen a little earlier. I was the one that said on the radio that we were looking at September, October, November towards the end of the 5th night here is when we would see the actual economic collapse. And Obama was elected almost exactly right about there, just as the 5th night ended at the beginning of the 6th day. I might also point out that the 6th planetary day, where Obama is here going into the 6th, actually Obama goes through here. This is where the fall of the dollar happens, November 7th. But here's the 6th night planetarily, or the 6th night in the galactic calendar. The 6th night, this period here in the planetary, this is galactic, the one right before this period means that we're in a hyperactivative period of all the events that occurred between approximately 1962 and 1972. Now think about that period of time, 1962 and 1972. Think of, you had people rising to political power very quickly and being assassinated very quickly. You had assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. You had, Malcolm X. was, I think, 64. You had tune in, turn on, drop out. You had revolution against the system. You had a massive reaction against war. All of these very interesting things happened. And, of course, we're now in the 6th night, which is all a sped-up hyperactivation of the 6th planetary night. You guys okay? Is this making any sense? Because you're looking kind of confused. Okay. 65. Okay, 65. Once again, this is the galactic underworld. It's a wave movement, and this just shows you that if you take all of these dates, May 27th of 2006, going into 2009, the rebirth celebration. I don't know, he's got May 11th. He's 2009, May 6th of 2010, May 11th. This basically just shows, and here we have the Venus transit on June 6th of 2012, which is the oneness celebration, a breakthrough celebration here. This is just the galactic wave movement of all these different things. Here's the Phoenix actually being reborn. Now, this is the Venus transit of 2012, and I'll show you some interesting things about this. This is where the transit's not visible here, but you'll actually see that this is where it cuts across. It forms almost a brain of the east and the west. Now, here's the entire transit is visible actually from here, from the center part of, well, that's in the middle of the ocean actually. So here the entire transit is visible. So here's the transit in progress at sunrise and sunset of 2012. So this is the world visibility of the transit at the time. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because in 2005 and 2006, we started studying crop circles that were actually predicting the future. And this particular crop circle is unique from a number of different aspects. First off, around the outside here, we began to notice that this is, in essence, a Mayan codex that actually points toward a back ton that actually relates to the year 2012. It gets even more interesting because now you have 4 rays of energy that are actually coming out looking very much like a Hopi sun disk, if you will, or a Thunderbird. Now here you have 16 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And here's a partial eclipse. Well, now we start thinking to ourselves, okay, where is there a partial eclipse visible? And what happens? And are these days of 16, because here's 2012 and here's a partial eclipse. Here's another shot of that crop circle here in another place and location. Now, one of the things we began to realize was not only was this predicting the future of an eclipse in 2012, a partial eclipse, but something happening in a 16-day period directly after this eclipse, which we thought was kind of weird. Well, one of the things that we realized was that the solar eclipse of May 20th of 2012 is a partial eclipse. And for the first time in approximately 26,000 years, the sun, the moon, and the Pleiades directly align over Chichen Itza in the Yucatan. It's the first time it's ever happened. And it's one of the reasons why these monuments were built, is you have the Pleiades, which began to align with the top of Chichen Itza and Tikal. It began to align in the year 2000. So every year on May 20th, the Pleiades actually crosses those temples. Then on May 20th, you have a partial eclipse, because most of the eclipse actually happens over North America, over the northern part of America. So now you have the Pleiades, the sun, and the moon directly aligned over this temple. Now, there's some other really interesting crop circles, and I'm not sure if you'd actually seen these circles before, but this is an artistic representation of the solar system. You notice anything wrong with this picture? Okay, what planet is that? There's the sun, right? Yeah. Next planet out is what? Next planet out is what? What's supposed to go there? It's gone. This was a crop circle from 2003. This is Mars. This is what? Asteroid belt, right? Where's the Earth? So this was a little frightening, the fact that now there's a crop circle that shows that Earth is gone. And now we're trying to figure out, well, okay, is that a time code? Is there some point in time when that crop circle directly aligns? So this crop circle, and I was actually doing an article on that crop circle when suddenly this crop circle popped up. And this was Avebury Manor in England on July 15th of 2008. And I had just run, and I'm sorry it's so dark in this, but I had just run a graphic or photo of where the planets were going to be aligned. This was in my newsletter in the first part of July. I'd actually run where the planets are going to be aligned in approximately 2012, and suddenly this crop circle pops up, and guess what? This is a representation of the solar system. There's even Pluto out here and Neptune and everything else. The Earth is in there. I'm sorry you can't see it because it's just so dark, and I should have used the other projector for this. But this is the approximate location of where the planets are going to be on December 21st of 2012. Now we've got crop circles telling us that planetary alignment is significant. So I'm walking down the back hallway of my house where I have some posters up and, getting a bag of cat litter for the cats out of the garage. And suddenly I noticed that this alignment, because I had some posters, this alignment and this alignment were the same alignments that this is where the planets were missing, that this is also the alignment of the planets in 2012 with the Earth conspicuously missing, and this is alignment of the planets in 2012 as well. So does this mean that we ascend? Does it mean that something happens to the Earth? Does it mean that we are somehow evolving? I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret this outside of the scary way that suddenly Earth just blows itself up and we're just suddenly destroyed. But now we've got crop circles from 2008 that are matching crop circles from 2003 that are now showing similar positions of the planets. This crop circle, I think, is the most interesting. Sorry. Back it up here. Come on. This crop circle, I think, is the most interesting. Well, there it went. Okay, well, this was an interesting crop. Okay, there it is. This crop circle was fascinating to me because this crop circle shows a winged phenomenon, and that this is, for lack of a better sense, this could be the sun, this could be the Earth in the center, but all this coating on the outside also shows 2012 with wings actually going into a vortex this way and going this way into a vortex and that way into a vortex. And once again, these lines representing days, and the 16 lines on the last crop circle, if I can go back here, hold on, let me see if it'll let me go back. This is what's the most unique about this crop circle. If this crop circle is the eclipse of May 20th of 2012, and by the way, there's two eclipses that year. There's the May 20th eclipse and the November 13th eclipse of 2012, and this is actually 16 days. It's interesting that the Venus transit happens exactly 16 days after the solar eclipse, which means in the 16 days between May 20th and the June 4th transit of Venus, these 16 days will somehow change life on Earth as we know it. That seems to be what the crop circles are actually intimating here. And I have another whole part of this presentation which shows you a series of crop circles that actually predicted the Edwin Holmes comet and what would go on. Actually, it's so much better if I could show you this, but this is Obama actually posing in front of the guy that looks like him, making the same face as the Aztec sun disk here, but you can't see it because this thing is so dark. So, but this is him actually posing with the president of Mexico. Now, we came across this book in 1994, and I've been talking about this book on Coast to Coast AM for years and years and years. Richard Hoagland recently has picked this up and started talking about it in his lectures. But this book, it was sent to me by Ken White, who was a kind of a fan and friend from the from the radio. And we came across World in Peril. Now, it was a memoir that Ken White wrote for his dad about a squadron his father served in after the war. And his father was Major Maynard White, who was the commander of the 46th and 72nd Recon Squadron of something called Project Nanook, which took place from June of 1946 through August 12th of 1948. And one of the things that they did is that the military mapped the magnetic fields of the Earth. One of the real challenges that we had is that the northern passage or the North Poles were closed to airline traffic because as you go over the North Poles, none of your magnets work, none of your compasses work because they just start spinning and going crazy. So the military wanted to be able to go up over the poles and open things up for military and commercial airline travel. So what they did is that they actually then, this was Maynard White. They actually outfitted there were only two of them. Yes, this was a B-29 bomber. It was the last B-29 bomber left. The only other B-29 bomber they had was the Enola Gay, which was actually the atom bomb plane that was actually in the Smithsonian. So they outfitted this thing to create a grid pattern over the North Pole to actually open up the poles to airline travel. Well, one of the things that they noticed is that at one of the scientific meetings that Major White attended in the Pentagon in early '48, the scientists discussed the advisability of alerting the public to a pending polar flip phenomenon. None of the scientists would agree to withhold the information from the public, but on the other hand, neither could they agree on how to release it. The knowledge of this phenomenon, some felt, could in itself destroy the moral fiber of society. Their fears, well, that happened anyway. So their fears were apparently unfounded when, in the early 50s, information about the flip phenomenon was released in a newspaper column and magazine article. It was actually on the cover of Look and Life magazine, but surprisingly generated no response from an apparently stunned, parochial or incredulous public. Actually, to give you an idea, it was so far off in the future, Lost in Space, the Swiss Family Robinson, or the Space Family Robinson, left for Alpha Centauri on August 11th of 1999. That gives you an idea of how far we felt that was in the future. It would seem that today's society, however, with its access to vast amounts of information and technological capabilities, should be better equipped to offer the sophisticated, profuse, and innovative reactions that the situation would seem to require. Only by making the facts known can we begin to mobilize the resources and brainpower necessary to overcome the obstacles. Clearly, a society that can deal responsibly with the concept of catastrophic change has the best chance of preparing for and surviving the change itself. What we do to prepare for the upcoming polar flip and its aftermath will amount to nothing less than a safeguard against total disaster. The difference between human beings and other creatures is that our destiny is not carved in stone. With purpose, ingenuity, and fortitude, we can change it if we so endeavor. The challenge is that what they discovered was that magnetic north and true north were moving towards each other, and that they felt that because of atomic testing, and it could be a cycle of the sun, but they felt that all the atomic weapons that have been dropped on our biggest enemy, Nevada, because we've dropped about 1,600 atomic weapons on Nevada, had actually knocked the Earth slightly out of its orbit. And that what was happening is that as magnetic north was actually marching towards true north, that when magnetic north and true north met, that you would actually have either a physical flip of the Earth or an electromagnetic flip of the North and South poles. This research has continued, by the way. It was at the Rand Corporation in the 50s and early 60s when they built actual scale mock-up models of the Earth. And you can check, Hyderabad University in India has run a series of computer models on this, showing that in about 10% of the cases, nothing happened. In about 30% of the cases, you actually had the planet actually flip over on its axis, and actually with the North Pole being somewhere in Saudi Arabia. And in 60% of the cases, they actually had an electromagnetic shifting of the poles. In other words, the North and South Pole began to wobble, creating massively wild weather patterns, and then suddenly the North and South magnetic poles then began to shift. So, what's that? Okay. Any quick questions while we got this? You guys look pretty dazed. I'm sorry. This is all more scientific than you were probably expecting. You can't see the screen? Just because my big head's in the way, or what do you want to do? How about that? Can you see it now? What? You can't see? Okay. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, so, I mean, is it inevitable that during December 21st, 2012, there will be some type of natural disaster?
No, but I'll show you why. Actually, just hang with me, and I'll show you what's being done about what's happening. Major White attended the Pentagon in early 1948. Sorry. Okay. I just read this already from World Apparel, so you guys don't know. But the present interglacial age, which is the age we're in, which is the Holocene epoch, began about 10,000 years ago and can be expected to end within the next 2,000 years. This estimate correlates very closely with that of government scientists who predict that the next flip of the Earth could occur any time between 17 and 1,000 years of the date of their study, which was conducted in 1947. This was Ken White from World Apparel. Just to give you an interesting idea, a bunch of the calendars on Earth all start over approximately 5,200 years ago. So if you look at 3,114 approximately, you have the beginning of this cycle of the Mayan calendar, which ends in 2012. You have the approximately beginning of the Hebrew calendar, which starts about then. You have the approximately beginning of another cycle in the Kali Yuga, which is the Hindu calendar. And one of the things that did happen very, very rapidly was a massive, almost instantaneous, virtually overnight glaciation of the planet. One of the things that was recently featured in a Discovery Channel special was they went to some of the glacier fields in Bolivia. And this was also, did you guys ever hear of the Austrian man? And I'm not talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, who became governor of California, but we're talking about a man who was found completely frozen in ice. And this all happened, once again, this guy was probably just walking along, and suddenly he is frozen solid approximately 5,200 years ago. There was some kind of very rapid glaciation of the planet that occurred virtually overnight that created these massive ice fields, these glaciers in Bolivia and Peru, and glaciated large portions of the Earth. And all you have to do is dig down, and you can see from the strata that this is about 5,200 years ago. Well, this is the cycle. This is when, approximately, within 2 years or so, when this Mayan calendar began, and it ends in 2012. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that we have all of this going on. Now, modern civilization would not survive the enormous climactic dislocations that must accompany such a polar shift. It is therefore imperative that the phenomenon known as polar wander be studied to the point that it can be, if not prevented, at least predicted and prepared for. And this is Frank N. McGill from McGill's Survey of Science. This is their science series of 1990. Now, this is Norway. And in Norway, they've now built what's called I can't even say it right, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. And this is an actual photograph of it. Have you guys heard about this project? The Svalbard Global Seed Project has been a massive underground vault, if you will. There's no other way to put it. A massive underground storage shelter for all of the seeds and plant life on Earth, so that just in case there is or was some kind of glaciation or some kind of polar flip or even a nuclear war or something that would completely destroy the world, this seed vault, going all the way back up into the mountains. And just to give you an idea, here's two people at the entrance, but this vault goes back, and this is the size of a good city block, actually, back in here, where they're storing all these seeds just in case. And this project was started about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's just now nearing completion. And I'll bet you anything that they're storing DNA in there as well. So this is what governments are doing. But once again, what do the ancients say? And then what can they tell us about what might happen? So if we go to the Hopi, this is very interesting. Now, I've tried to find an accurate depiction of the Hopi talking rock, and I don't know why it's not there. But let me give you the brief history of what this is. This is one of the inscriptions on Second Mesa of the Hopi talking rock. And I don't have it on me today, but I have a silver bracelet that was actually given to me by grandfather Thomas Banyakia, who was the actual speaker of the Coyote clan of the Hopi tribe, who was a very good friend of mine, and we traveled around the world together, and we did speaking engagements together, and did a lot of great things, and went out to go visit him for his birthday out in the Hopi Nation. But just to give you an idea, it is believed that the Hopi people, what Hopi means is the happy, peaceful people, and it consisted of white races, red races, yellow races, and black races. And their mythology is that the Hopi quite possibly came from Mars, way back in the distant past. That Mars, through a series of wars, actually completely desertified the planet, and large canals had to be built to actually bring water from the poles, from the ice caps from the poles. The Hopi legend is that they sent birds through a hole in the sky to search for another paradise into the upper worlds. In other words, worlds closer to the sun. Finally, one day, the bird of paradise, the blue bird of paradise, actually came back through the hole, sang a song of happiness, and the happy, peaceful people gathered up everyone who didn't want war anymore. They got on this blue bird and went through this hole in the sky, led by the great white brother, Mashau. And Mashau, and this is the solar disk here, and you see the swastika, which is actually it's actually a representation of the swirling galaxy. They come to the Earth. Now the problem is that, and this is kind of a weird, again, this whole thing is completely wrong, and I don't know why I couldn't find it, but there's three people. There's one man that actually, which is the red man, which actually stays true to the path and stays on the Earth. The three other races of the white race, the red race, the black race, and the yellow race, all are up here, and they don't have heads. In other words, their heads are actually floating above their bodies, which means their minds are not connected to their hearts, which they call the path of Koyaanisqatsi, which means the way of the clown. And what happens is that because these three races are so disconnected from the earth that two great shakings of the earth occur. This one, in their prophecies, they said the first great shaking of the earth would occur when you had marching Gachinas across the plains. And of course, if anybody's driven across the Midwest, you see these big power line towers. You ever seen how they look like Gachinas kind of marching across the plains? That you would have giant Gachinas marching across the plains, that men would fly in machines that would fly above the ground. You would have an iron horse. All these things that they predicted as far as technology goes, leading up to the first great shaking of the earth, which is the First World War. Then the second great shaking of the earth would be great disaster, because the people from the land of the white man would throw a gourd of ashes onto the land of the yellow man, causing great destruction, great burning. And you know why the Hopi knew all about atomic weapons? Because we get all our uranium-235 from off the Hopi Nation. Actually, that's where most of the uranium in the world actually comes from, is the center part of Arizona. And the Hopi are on this big campaign to say, look, take all this uranium and put it back in the ground where it belongs, because out there it's causing all kinds of chaos. And Grandfather Banyakia was the one who was campaigning against the Apollo guys bringing rocks back from the moon. He was saying that if you bring rocks back from the moon, it will create it'll be creating a great disharmony on the Earth and the planet. So what finally happens is that we're right here, and they say that we have a choice. That we have a choice to go back and live more in tune with the land and with ourselves, to reattach our heads, if you will. And if we do that, there will be a third great shaking of the earth. Not as great as the first two, but we'll get through this third great shaking of the earth. Corn will grow again. The great white brother Mashal returns, and there will be peace on the planet, and corn will grow, and everything's happy. They do also say that before this final destruction, that there's a man and a woman who are sky people who actually come with a great prophecy, sort of like a day the earth stood still sort of thing, with one last great warning. So this rock drawing shows part of the Hopi prophecy. Two paths, the first with high technology but separate from natural and spiritual law, leads to these jagged lines representing chaos. The lower path is one that remains in harmony with natural law. This slide here we see a line that represents a choice like a bridge joining the paths. And if we return to spiritual harmony and live from our hearts, we can experience a paradise in this world. If we continue only on the upper path, we will come to destruction, which is what that represents. Part of the Hopi prophecy, and this is the 9th and last sign, you will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens above the earth that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of the Hopi people will cease. Now, this is kind of interesting because some people believe that was Skylab. Remember when Skylab came crashing down, and Skylab was a place in the sky? However, it could also be the International Space Station is a place in the sky. It is interesting because several months ago, the Iranians actually launched a missile into space that actually went directly across the apogee of the International Space Station. Not just once, but went out and then came back across the apogee as well. All the Iranians would have to do is that this missile that they sent up had a payload of about 250 pounds or so. All they would have to do, and I'm not kidding, they would just have to take a big bag of sand, actually put some C4 on it, send it up into the apogee of the space station, explode it, and that sand would then travel as granules at 1,000 miles an hour and could actually just slice the space station into shreds, which would then destroy the space station, which might possibly fulfill this Hopi prophecy. Now, their ceremonies have not stopped yet, and so that would mean that it's not Skylab, that it's obviously waiting for something else that's going to go on. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting because here's the north magnetic pole of the planet. And you can actually see the radiation going down. And then once again, there's 3 poles here, 1, 2, and 3 actually on the north magnetic pole as we actually move up along the Earth. Here's an actual map of Canada. There's Middle Earth, there's Narnia, there's Munchkin Land right there. That's where Santa lives, right there. And there's Baffin Bay. Here's Ellesmere Island, and on Ellesmere Island there is approximately where true magnetic north is. Now, here's another Google map of it. This also shows you Ellesmere Island. This is where north is actually at. Now, let me show you something really interesting. Okay. This is the north geographic pole. In other words, this is the actual axis point of the planet. This is where the North Magnetic Pole was originally found, and actually between 1831, this is when the North Magnetic Pole was actually found in 1831. I forget the scientist who discovered it. It was 1831. This pole was stable until approximately 1945. After 1945, the pole, see how it started what they called polar wander. 1948, it moved to here. 1974, it was there. 1985, it was there. 1992, it was there. Now remember, from 1831 to 1945 up to 1948, the pole was moving so drastically that they were expecting that when the North Pole, when the magnetic North Pole actually met the geographic North Pole, that we would experience a polar flip in the planet between approximately 2012 and 2014. This had the military really worried, and you can see that it was marching all the way up. Now, 3 months ago, actually right around late part of November and December, this is the North Pole now. See the North Magnetic Pole in 2010? Somebody jammed it 600 miles to the east. So the North Pole now is not marching towards the true north, but is now heading towards Siberia. Why this wasn't in every newspaper, every scientific journal, on the front page of every newspaper everywhere, you guys want to know why you've had such a weird, savage winter here? There it is. Because what's happened is that now you've moved the North Pole about 600 miles to the east, which means that the Siberian Express that comes down into the United States, this whole Northwest Territory here, this is the Midwest under here. Now you've had all this weather shoved to the East Coast. So the Siberian Express, instead of hitting the Midwest, is now, guess where? Pretty much over New York. So what happened? How did this occur? Now, the good news is that it looks like if it's taken a savage right turn here and is heading towards Siberia, it's not going to hit the North Pole anytime soon, which means no polar flip. The bad news is it's going to get really freaking cold in New York for a while. And you guys are going to have some really savage and severe weather problems as this begins to move over. What is it, quite possibly, that could have actually done this? Well, there's something in Alaska, and it's behind a U.S. Air Force installation, and it's something called the HAARP Project. You guys heard of this? High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. And the HAARP Project does some pretty weird things to the weather up there. And it is possible that the HAARP Project was actually being used, and again, remember, you had all this stuff from the military from the 1940s, and then everything kind of goes quiet on it in the 1970s. Is the HAARP Project actually being used to jam magnetic north savagely to the right, or to the east, if you will, because and you can check this on the internet if you want, but it said a mysterious magnetic pulse actually suddenly just drove magnetic north that direction. Now, the HAARP Project is, you guys probably know a lot about it already, but it's basically an antenna farm. It works with extra low frequency waves. What does HAARP do? HAARP could be used for a number of different things. One, as a weapon, you can actually harden a layer of the atmosphere. You can actually take the HAARP project, harden an actual layer of the atmosphere, and then bounce microwaves off it if you want, and cook everybody in Beijing like microwave popcorn. That's the weapons aspect of it. Another aspect of it is you can use these antennas, extra low frequency wave antennas, to communicate on a secure stealth channel with virtually any submarine anywhere in the world. The other aspect of this is that it could quite possibly be used to actually, if there was a Z-pinch, if there was an actual solar flare, where the solar flare actually came in through the top part of the Van Allen belt and the bottom part of the Van Allen belt, possibly wipe out life on Earth, you could actually use the HAARP project, and there's numbers of these. There's not just one. There's probably about a dozen of them all over the Earth. But you could actually create a hardened lens of air actually in that pocket to actually keep a Z-pinch from bouncing off. You could actually bounce a solar flare off the atmosphere actually using this technology. Now, and at the same time, you could also do it to possibly jam magnetic north. This is kind of interesting because here, this is a whole series of Tesla coils in the Russian forest, high voltage cascade transformers, what's called the ionospheric project. There was somebody that wrote me that said, no, what are you talking about? That's a water slide at Magic Mountain or something. And I'm like, no, it's in the Siberian forest. And this is what the Russians are doing. Now, are they working in concert with the HAARP project? I'm not exactly sure, but it is certainly interesting when you think about how we're beginning to align with the center of the galaxy, and all of these things are kind of happening all at once. Now, this is why I feel I'm going to skip through a couple of these things to get to the interesting stuff. Now, Carl Kalaman has done some fascinating work in regards to this, because what he's done here is that he's divided this whole week up. Now, remember, his end date is October 28th of 2011, so I don't quite agree with that. I think we've got another year after that, because it's another 13 months until the December aspect of it. But here's what's interesting. We go from January 5th of 1999, which is when this starts, which he calls the first world of the serpent. So we have the snake kind of moving through the grass. Then in 2002, on March 20th, we move into the world of the dog, which is we become more curious, and the dog starts jumping up over the grass. Then we move into the third stage of the eagle, which is the eagle now flying over and actually viewing the patterns of creation, if you will. Now, here's what's really unique, is that in 2008, right here, and this is approximately August 8th of 2008, at the same time as the Olympics are occurring, and this is actually, it was from August 15th through about August 30th of 2008, we now have what Kalaman claims was going to be, and he predicted this very many months in advance, said that we would have a cosmic pulse of energy and information that would come from out of the east, that would rebalance the eastern and western mind and begin the fourth and final world of the sun, which he called the advent of the pre-universal cycle. Well, what was the pulse of energy that came out of the east at that particular time? The Olympics, right? 4 billion people watched the Olympics. And did you guys watch it? Was anybody else like scared out of their mind by all those Chinese people doing all that stuff all at once? I mean, it was like, oh my goodness, I hope they don't come over here. But it was okay because they were all for sale on eBay the next day, and I picked up about 10 of them. So if you guys want one. Anyway, so here's the Tzolk'in rounds, and this is fascinating because now it comes into 2008, 2009, 2010. Here's the Venus passage on June 6th of 2012. And here's where his end date is. But again, I have to disagree with his timing. I think it's a little bit more extended than that, because here he has February 11th of 2011 starting the universal underworld, and I would put this date at February of 2012 again, because there's just too much happening in 2012. So here's the galactic underworld with its days and nights. And Carl, I'm not sure how sure Carl is about this stuff, because Carl had us all working on the harmonic convergence on May 27th, 28th, and 29th. And then Carl just decided to change his mind and say, oh, no, it's not then. It's really July 16th and 17th. And we're like, well, but we got this whole thing planned in Mount Shasta. And he's like, no, the harmonic convergence, I have changed my mind that it's really by running the cycles that it's over here and not over there. So I'm like, okay, good, Carl. Well, so he's still going to be at the thing in Mount Shasta with us if you guys want to actually come out to that. This is what's really fascinating, is because here we have an overview, a future overview, if you will, of what each one of these years is going to be like. So, for example, from 2008 to 2009, a renaissance of the advanced unifying synthesis. And let me explain to you what the unifying synthesis of the Mayans is. Each great civilization has a motto, has a saying, if you will. To the Greeks, it was know thyself. To the Romans, it was to thine own self be true. To the Egyptians, it was as above, so below, as within, so without. The great American motto of the American civilization is Mo is better. If I just had Mo as something, it'd be better. And the motto of the Mayan civilization is all is one, life has purpose, God is love. And I keep saying that over and over and over again, because Richard Nixon said, you got to say things 1,000 times, sick to death of saying it, and that's when people start listening. So all is one means that all is one means that we are all connected to each other, we are biologically connected to one another, chemically connected to the earth, and atomically connected to the world, atomically connected to the universe. Is that you, Reg? I'll cut you some slack, but turn it off, will you? Thanks. Get some Mozart on there or something. Huh? No? All right. Where was I? So all is one. Life has purpose. I think that's the greatest aspect of the Mayan prophecy, because it means no matter how many terrible things have happened in your life, no matter how many low kicks and dirty tricks and rotten licks you've taken, it means that you're at the exact right point in time, at the exact right point in history to be exactly what you're doing. So everything in your life has led you to sitting here in this chair being bored to tears by me right at this moment. So when he says the renaissance of the advanced unifying synthesis, that means we begin to get all is one, life has purpose, God is love. A tense coexistence of the East and the West between new spirituality and the remnants of global materialistic power. I will also point out that in, actually right here, actually this was the big one. This was 07 to 08 to November 12th. Remember the financial collapse happened right in this period of time. Deep crisis for global, and remember he wrote this book in 2004. So deep crisis for global materialist culture, destructive reaction, Armageddon, European Union and Germany in the center of the drama. Not so much Armageddon here, but certainly, don't you think that this period of time, 07 to 08, was a deep crisis for global materialist civilization? The plan is that everything around you, material civilization, must begin to collapse because it is based on slavery and lies. And so something has to turn around to replace it, to have a monetary system that is based more on the spiritual and not about collecting units of Federal Reserve debt notes, but about you waking up every day and saying, how do I create value within the society? How can I be of service to others? How can I create what House Joint Resolution 192 of 1933, what the actual economy of the United States is based on, which is the faith, spirit, and energy of the people of the United States. Faith means you believe that you believe a system's in place. Spirit means you think of ways to create value within that system, and energy means you get up and you put on your pants, you put on your socks and shoes, you put on your coat, you go outside, and you move your arms and legs around to create some kind of value within the civilization. Also, I might also point out that this destructive reaction, remember the little incident with South Ossetia? Remember that? When Bush was all drunk at the Olympics and Putin was yelling at him because the United States was helping the Israelis and helping them attack Russia and kill like 1,500 people. And that came this close to being like a war with the Russians because Putin was that close to actually just saying, screw you, I'm going to take back all of Soviet Georgia. we're not even going to mess with you guys anymore, we're going to take it back. Because it was the United States that actually, with the assistance of the Israelis, that went in, killed 1,500 Russian citizens, I might add, and Putin, within 20 minutes of hearing that, had troops and bombs and guns and planes and tanks. I mean, had he not reacted the way he did, I'm surprised, to tell you the truth, I'm surprised Putin, it's interesting because Putin was born, I was born on his birthday, October 1st, so I know he's kind of a Libra sort of guy, so he didn't overreact. But had he overreacted and had he taken the rest of Georgia and simply just reabsorbed it into Russia, we would have had, it would have been a really bad day. So, right here, the next year, 08 to 09, a renaissance of the advanced unifying synthesis. In other words, all the spirituality that has to, by nature, spring out of everything that's going on with the global collapse. Tense coexistence of East and West, that's certainly happening between the United States and China and Russia, between new spirituality and the remnants of global materialistic power. That line right there. New spirituality and remnants of global materialistic power, that's what's going to start amping up. That's why the government's going to start coming after people like me and people like you, and the media is going to start pounding us down and all these things, because they're going to try to do anything they can do to stop this new wave of spirituality happening. Now, right here, from 09 to 10, resting period in preparation for attaining balance between the East and the West, the second harmonic convergence, which he says is May 27th, but now he says is January 16th and 17th, and the first experience of a galactic pulse of cosmic consciousness. Now, this is going to be the cosmogenesis. This is when we're all going to be up in Mount Shasta, but he now says this is going to be July 16th and 17th when this pulse is going to occur. And then for 2010 to 2011, balance is attained between the East and the West, end of control by one soul over another, and the beginning of the universal underworld and the development of non-dual cosmic consciousness. That's like the biggest point. Do me a favor, stand up, everybody, and you guys just want to stand up and stretch? Oh, make your orgasm noise. And stretch around. Okay, and just lean over and just kind of hang for a second. Just stretch out your lower back. Usually I have my boombox here. This is where we do our 1-minute dance party, So it's like, everybody dance now. Bum, 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 bum. There you go. You got the feeling? You got the feeling? There you go. Okay, sit down. You're stretched up. How much time we got here? We're running okay? I'm sorry, I'm just beating you guys with information here. I told you. Are you guys? Is this interesting? Are you guys enjoying yourself? All right, cool. Yes, ma'am. Question.
What happened to the black hole that created in
Norway? I'm getting to it right now. I'm getting to it right now. I promised you you're going to see it, and now you're going to see it. All right, this is the solar eclipse. There's 2 solar eclipses and a transit and the end of the Mayan calendar all happening in 2012, which is really interesting. Now, remember how we were talking about how the Earth is a global brain? Remember how we talked about that, and how the East represents the intuitive mind and the West represents the logical didactic mind? Now, if you looked at the planet as a brain, and if you looked at the separation between East and West, then where would you think the logical separation between the East and the West would be on the planet? Don't you think it would be on the timeline, the international date line, where you go from East to West, where you go from night to day? Actually, if you travel here, you go backwards in time. You actually pick up a day here. Well, this is why it's so interesting, because the annular solar eclipse of 2012 on May 20th, the eclipse, and this is what's really interesting, it begins in China here. It just starts forming here, and it's interesting because I have this whole theory about Japan. I have a theory that my theory is that there's 6 chakra points on the planet. And the 6 chakra points are, the base root chakra of the planet is Lhasa, Tibet, which is where the masculine aspect of the God ray actually strikes the planet. The second chakra of the planet, which is the prostate ovarian, the sort of belt or the balance of the earth, is the Great Pyramid of Giza, because Giza is built directly on the center of all the landmass on Earth. It is also representative of the belt of Orion, and the Great Pyramid itself, which is also called the pillar of remembrance to Michael. It's also called Enoch's pillar, but it represents Michael. It represents the Archangel Michael. It represents the Son of God. It represents Enoch. It's got the mother, the father. It's got the father, which is Kephren, the mother, which is Mycineros. And then it's got the child or the son or the Anubis or the Archangel Michael as Khufu, which is the Great Pyramid of Giza, is the second chakra. The third chakra, which is a sun wheel calendar, is Stonehenge, England. The heart chakra of the world is Machu Picchu. The throat chakra is Los Angeles, California, which is the communications vortex of the world. New York very much communicates with the country, but Los Angeles communicates in terms of, you know, Disneyland and Warner Brothers and Paramount. I mean, we communicate in terms of radio and music and films and movies. So what we do in Hollywood and Los Angeles are stories and fables that are told to the entire world. And the sixth chakra of the planet is right here, Osaka, Japan, right there. And this is also one of the reasons why the flag of Japan is also known as the rising sun, why people in India wear the bindu, which is the red dot of consciousness in the center part of the forehead. The seventh chakra is us, the seventh chakra is the new sphere, as Pierre Lesjardins called it, which is our being interconnected with people. I really think that this is what the internet is becoming. Finally, once you get through all the junk and the porn and the lies and the crap and, you know, all that stuff, eventually you're going to be looking at search. They're already talking about search engines that are called universal search engines. You're talking about using nanotechnology and fuzzy logic and hyper advanced ways for people to be able to search and find anything. You're talking about the one thing that was an information system that was meant to be decentralized in case of a nuclear war. That's the one weasel that really got out of the box. Because the bad guys like to control energy, food, and information. And now they can't control information primarily because of the internet. The Chinese are a little upset at Google right now, but that's because about 6 months ago, Google signed a big deal with the Central Intelligence Agency to be able to scan everybody that goes onto Google and basically turn over all their files on portal searches and whatever else over to the CIA. And the CIA also allows them to put all kinds of spyware and cookies and backdoors and all kinds of crazy things. So that's what the Chinese are upset about. They're not so upset about the fact, you hear in the newspapers here, it's all about freedom of speech and we don't want people to hear things. No, the Chinese are like, Google's being used by the Central Intelligence Agency and we don't appreciate it very much. The Tiananmen Square riots occurred primarily not because it was a big oppression of the rights, it was because China kicked the Rockefellers they kicked Chase Manhattan Bank out of China. Chase Manhattan and Citicorp, they kicked out. So that guy standing with the shopping carts in front of a tank was probably screaming, hey, I just bought all this stuff. What am I supposed to do with it now? They gave me a credit card and now I can't pay for it. All right, that's a little too much. All right, so here's where it starts, right over the sixth chakra. Now, as this eclipse occurs, the greatest period of the eclipse, look at this. This is the international date line right here. See how it's activating the bicameral fissure of the brain of the planet? All right, and as it moves across, here's Mount Shasta, California right here, and then it cuts across Salt Lake City, just across the top of Nevada, and then eventually culminates in, I have to do something special to this. This is really cool. Well, I thought it was really cool. Come on. Come on. Heck. Wow, my wife was so proud of this, too. She had this whole graphic that was going to work for you, and it was going to be all tricky, and now it doesn't. Okay. Slideshow, view presenter tools. Oh, you so suck. Oh, God. All right. Well, this is this whole impressive graphic. I was going to go, ooh, look, it's all neat. All right. It all stinks. What I was going to do is that this was going to be a graphic that was just going to show you that the eclipse starts here and goes all the way across, but that's obviously not going to work now, so, you know, whatever. Stinky computer technology. So this is where it actually comes across. There's Mount Shasta right there. It's right there, and this is where it actually cuts across into the United States. So it comes, you know, the really kind of freaky part about this is that right there, see where Eureka is? That's the top of the San Andreas Fault right there. So as it comes across, you know, and you having an eclipse with energy actually activating, this is not in some ways going to be a very good day because this is, you have a fault line there. You've got a fault line there in Tahoe, right over Reno, because it actually goes right over Lake Tahoe. Anybody been to Lake Tahoe? Anybody? Actually, Lake Tahoe is exactly like the Sea of Galilee. If you've been to Lake Tahoe and been to Israel, the Sea of Galilee is exactly 26 miles across, as is Tahoe, 13 miles wide, as is Tahoe. It's kind of funny when you think that the entire Bible happens between Cal Neva and somewhere over in Kings Beach, so or Tahoe City, if you've actually been there. But here's where it actually culminates across. This is the other path here. It just gives you an idea of where that eclipse path goes. Now, what's fascinating is that there's a second eclipse, and this second total solar eclipse occurs on November 13th of 2012. This is actually and this eclipse begins at the top of Australia, cuts across, and once again, this is where the greatest aspect of the eclipse occurs. So this part is actually activating the southern hemisphere with the totality of the eclipse once again right on the international date line. So there's the first eclipse in May, which begins right over Japan over the 6th chakra, comes across, blasts this energy right on the date line in the bicameral fissure of the brain, comes across, goes into Mount Shasta, cuts across the San Andreas Fault, comes all the way down, and actually terminates at the heart of the Dove, actually in Lubbock, Texas, of all places. And then you have, 16 days later, the transit of Venus, one of the most important dates in the Mayan calendar, which then activates the right-hand side of the brain, activates the feminine, is the return of the female Quetzalcoatl energy, the feminine strand of the serpent of DNA. And then in November of 2012, you've got another eclipse that cuts across, where the greatest totality of the eclipse also occurs directly over the international date line, which I think is particularly of interest. Now, you guys want to talk a little politics about some other things that are going on? You have any questions about this? Yes,
Yeah.
Maria.
So,
Hold on. Yes.
you don't want to be around where the eclipse happens on those days?
No, I'm not saying that. I think the eclipse date. We're talking about where to be on those dates. I mean, Mount Shasta would be a good place to be. I think. You can actually go to the eclipse is where it's going to be a partial eclipse from the Yucatan, but you'll actually have the alignment of the Pleiades and the Sun and the Moon directly over Tikal and Chichen Itza. I'm not saying you don't want to be there. I'm just saying it's going to activate it. I mean, is it going to cause an earthquake like right then? No. What I'm hoping is that we have enough consciousness to be able to actually transmute, transform, and transmogrify the energy of these eclipses. I'm just saying that it's dynamic. It's unusual. You've got two solar eclipses that occur right over the international date lines and a Venus transit. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that doesn't happen for hundreds of years again. And it just so happens to be happening in 2012. And there are people that are saying, oh, there's nothing to 2012, and everybody talks about it as complete nonsense. It's not, because the Mayan prophecies, the Egyptian prophecies of the Great Pyramid, astronomy, astrology, it's all culminating in this 2012 date. And it doesn't mean the planet's going to end or flip over, and there are some serious challenges to be faced as well. This could be the reset button for planet Earth when you think about it. Yes, ma'am. May 20th of 2012 and November 13th of 2012. And the Venus transit is June 6th of 2012. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you were talking about the different places that represented different chakras. Is
Yes.
there a specific place for the crown or the seventh chakra?
No, it's us. That's what I pointed out. The seventh chakra, it's why the pyramid has no capstone. The Earth is not yet a sacred world. Now, there is one kind of interesting aspect of it, is that this is South America, if I could back this up. Well, the Mayans have a different chakra point, or what they call the world tree. So, for example, I learned about the chakra system from the Tibetans. The Tibetans talked about Lhasa Tibet as the root of the world, Cairo, Egypt being the prostate ovarian chakra, the belt of the world, if you will, the solar plexus being Stonehenge, England, the heart chakra being Machu Picchu, the throat being Osaka, Japan. Actually, it's not exactly Osaka, Japan. It's a place called, the throat chakra being downtown Los Angeles. Actually, the exact center point of the chakra is the gazebo on Elvira Street, which is right next to the famous building that, actually, it's interesting. You know the famous building that's on the badge for Dragnet? It's on the shoes, City Hall. It was City Hall, but now it's the library building. It's like the most famous building in Los Angeles. It was on the Dragnet badges and the whole thing. The top of that building is actually a Mayan pyramid. The top of the building actually has 9 levels on it, and it's actually representative of a Mayan ziggurat. So it's interesting. And then the third eye being, actually, it's a place called Tenri City outside of Osaka, Japan. And there's a religion that was started by a woman named Oyama in the 1840s who was actually channeling Pleiadian extraterrestrials at the time. A Japanese woman, if you can imagine, who started this religion there. And there is in the chakra point itself, there's a huge granite pillar that actually is directly in the center part of the chakra that all the priests go around and they throw water on, and you can't photograph it, and people pray to it and do this whole big deal because it's this red granite pillar that goes directly into the third eye. And the actual pillar is called the Kaudi Dai. And it's the centerpiece of a religion called Tenrikyo in Japan. And it's a sacred city, it's a hospital, and it's all kinds of stuff. The Mayans, however, let me get a drink of water here. The Mayans, however, have their world tree. And their world tree of the demarcation between the East and the West has the base root of the chakra in Gabon, Africa. And then the line runs directly up, and this is where they believe the bicameral fissure of the planet is, runs through Rome, runs up through Berlin, and eventually terminates up in Stockholm, Sweden somewhere. Well, this is really kind of strange, because if you actually think of, they look at it as Gabon, Africa, as being representative of the cerebellum, actually the medulla oblongata, which is athletic ability, which is movement, which is dance, which is the ability to run and jump and do all kinds of things in the center. And it's also, we've now learned, that Gabon, Africa is the center of where we believe most of life on this planet actually began to evolve. And it was on Survivor, I think, last year or something, Survivor Gabon. But why would a Mesoamerican people actually have a world tree that's not in Mesoamerica? In other words, they're actually pointing to the African and European peoples as being the ones responsible for the next wave of evolution on the planet. Because what happens is that when the world tree expands, now remember this line of demarcation, which represents the bicameral fissure, which represents the pituitary, the pineal gland, the hippocampus, all the regulatory organs of the brain in the center of the two brains that we have. Well, there is no greater regulatory organization on earth than the Catholic Church when you think about it. And then if you move it up into Berlin and Nuremberg, you can then think of the Lutheran Church as also being the same thing. But when the world tree expands, you have the Roman Empire, and when it contracts, you have the Visigoths. When it expands, you have the Germans attacking everybody, and when it contracts, you have the Americans and the Russians coming in. When it, you could say when it expands, you have the British, the British Empire, and when it contracts, you have the Vikings that come after them. So it's very interesting that along this line of demarcation as well, when Genghis Khan actually invaded this area, and the Mongol horde came, they stopped on that line. They never actually went past that line of demarcation, and they were stopped at the Black Forest in Austria and never came across. But they raped everything in their path, which is why you have kind of a Mongolian mix of peoples in Eastern Europe. So, yes, ma'am. Yes, Lydia. Hi.
Politically, financially.
Yep, that's what we're getting into right now. Do I look like a guy with a plan? This is my take on the famous Joker book, because I'm like, everybody had this as socialism. I'm like, that's not what the Joker was about. The Joker was like, remember when Two-Face was going to kill him? And he was like, I was in jail. Do I look like a guy with a plan? And so, if you want to talk about Barack Obama here and what's going on with him, and let's just talk about a couple of things about Barack Obama. Here's the birth certificate. This was the birth certificate that came out of Hawaii. That was just a certificate that was printed on a laser printer in 2000. This is, you guys wanted to see it. I promised I would show it to you. There was a young man who actually went to Kenya, went to Mombasa, went to the Hall of Records, bribed some people, and this is Obama's actual birth certificate. And this was the birth certificate that says he was born in Mombasa, Kenya on August 4th of there you go, right there. Right at the top, 1961, there it is, General Hospital, certified copy of registered birth by Joshua Stevens Oduya, Stanley Ann Obama, Barack Hussein Obama Sr. There he is, there's the birth certificate, there's some other details of it. Here, it does not, but that's why we've got to take the time. The date of registration was the 5th of August, 61. It's interesting that the date of registration on the Hawaiian birth certificate was August 8th of 61. Here's Barack Hussein the second, but this is the actual birth certificate that you guys, you were interested, so I told you I would pull it up and I would show it to you. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, yes, he's a dual citizen. Yes, he was born in Kenya. The bottom line is we haven't had an actual, there's two oaths that you have to take. There's an Article 2 oath and an Article 6 oath. The Supreme Court is never going to touch this. It's a non-issue. So what? People just need to get over it. Everybody wants to cheat the process. He was elected fair and square. So, I know that the challenge with this whole thing is that both McCain and Obama should have been kicked out of the presidential race because McCain was born in Panama. And I know that they say, oh, it was a military family and all that. Well, tough. Panama is not part of the United States. He was not a natural-born citizen, and Panama was a leased territory. It had nothing to do with the United States. And if you look in the military manual, you look under Section 6, it says, no, Panama is not part of the United States. By the way, the last time the Supreme Court actually ruled on whether or not a president was eligible for citizenship was in the case of Barry Goldwater. And in 1964, Barry Goldwater, they took it to the Supreme Court, the Democrats did, because Barry Goldwater was born in Arizona when it was a territory, not a state. And so the Supreme Court took him a day to do it. The Supreme Court said, We're going to let Barry Goldwater slide because Barry Goldwater was born in a territory, and that territory was under the eminent domain of the United States. Therefore, Barry Goldwater can come in. Which, I think the one guy that's the most mad about this has got to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. This certificate it's just I could be president. Austria is so much better than Kenya. We can kick Kenya's ass. I tell you, why can't I be president now? I'm married to a Kennedy. You should let me be president. I'll do a good job. I'll do better than California. I promise. So, okay, and I've got this great joke. I think he should go back to acting. And I think that they should. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger should play our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I actually do, because Arnold Schwarzenegger. Think about it. He comes back, and it's like, yes, you've seen him in Terminator, you've seen him in Running Man. Now he plays our Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ. You'll see him walk upon the water. Look, I'm walking on water. Peter follows him out. Help, Jesus, I'm sinking. Quick, Peter, take my hand if you want to live. Take my hand if you want to live. You'll see him tip over the money changers, tip over the tables of the money changers in the temple. My Father's house should be a house of prayer. Get out, get out, get out now, get out now. They beat him, they punch him, ow, 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 ow. They hang him on the cross. Oh, Jesus, what should we do now that you've died? Don't worry, Peter, I'll be back. There you go, it's perfect. It's perfect. All right, here's his actual birth chart. This is a birth chart that I came up with, that I tried to present to these big egghead guys at Oxford University, at Exeter College, when I was at the astrological conference there in the summer, and they wouldn't even take a look at it. This chart is kind of interesting. We only have like 10 minutes left. God, I got a bunch more stuff to get through. So here's the sun in Leo. Here's Taurus at 26 degrees. What does this mean? It just means the ascendant Aquarius. I mean, this is kind of the only thing that worries me is the Aquarius. Yeah, it's the Aquarius ascendant right here. 21 degrees Aquarius, or 27 degrees Aquarius. 27 degrees Aquarius. So again, this is my theory. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't. This is taken from the time of the birth chart of the Hawaiian birth chart, because there wasn't actually. Is there a time on here? No, there's not. Yeah, see 61. There's no time. 25 years old. Barack Hussein Obama was. No. So there you go. All right. So this is what's interesting. Leo, Taurus. I mean, Taurus moon means he's a good talker, good public speaker. The Leo means he's kind of into himself. He's got a big ego. Cancer is interesting because he does have Cancer in Venus, so it shows an actual real love and connection with the country. The Mars in Virgo. This is a little Hitlerian right here. This Mars in Virgo is like, he'll fix anything. It doesn't matter what. It's the Jupiter in Aquarius, the Saturn in Capricorn right here. This means that the coming financial crisis, he's not going to handle well. He's going to make every mistake possible when it comes to the finances of the nation. He's got Neptune in Scorpio, which also means that he's not above, doing some very, very sneaky stuff. He's also got Pluto in Virgo, which means that Pluto in Capricorn right now, this is a very difficult chart. I mean, for where he's at right now, this chart, if you do this chart from Mombasa, Kenya, he winds up President of the United States. You do the chart for Hawaii, he winds up night manager of 7-Eleven. I'm not even kidding. If you actually put this together, and then relocate it to Washington, D.C. And look, I ain't hating, I'm just stating. I'm just telling you that it doesn't work if you do it for the chart that they're telling you. It works if you do this particular chart here. So I got to cruise through some different stuff here. There was a woman that was asking about the chart of the United States. Now, there's a different theory about this. The chart of the United States done for July 2nd of 1776, David McCulloch, who's the guy who wrote the book about John Adams, just did a whole slew of research claiming that the forefathers actually signed the the Declaration of Independence on July 2nd of 1776 and then held off on it for 2 days to give Washington time to prepare the militia should there be some kind of violent reaction by the British at the time. This is the cardinal climax that's actually coming up that actually says, there's an excerpt where noted all charts use the Placidius house, but the cardinal climax is coming up in the Aries house against the July 2nd date of 1776. Basically shows that this is the cardinal cross here where you have Pluto in Capricorn. This is messed up. I mean, this chart and this chart together, this basically is a bankruptcy chart. This shows everything in this chart is activating this summer, actually about July 27th or so on this particular chart. This is also the chart of the U.S. Federal Reserve System. And you'll see that they have the sun in Capricorn, which is also being directed by, on the chart coming up here, there's Pluto in Capricorn right there. This chart here, and I'm not going to go through a bunch of babble with you here, but this chart here, you've got the sun in Capricorn, you've got Venus in Sagittarius, moon in Scorpio, which means the Federal Reserve is sneaky and underhanded and doing all kinds of nasty things. But in essence, the coming Grand Cross looks to me like the destruction of this system. Looks to me like either the destruction or transmutation. And if you do the charts of the Federal Reserve, the U.S. dollar, Barack Obama, Robert Gates, who's the Secretary of Defense, all with this, it means that Timothy Geithner as well. If you throw his chart into this, along with the chart of the U.S. Federal Reserve, it means that something begins to occur this summer, between like July and September or so, that leads to the transmutation or destruction of the economic system, the executive branch, and the military all at once. In other words, they begin to transform. I think what's going to happen is that when Uranus moves into Aries, this is on May 27th, and Uranus moves out of Pisces, which means for 7 years we've been in this weird kind of dream state. And when Uranus moves into Aries and people start waking up really angry and really mad, that part of that anger is going to be, we're not so concerned about power anymore. Now we're more concerned about peace and community. Now we're more concerned about, we don't care whether or not we're the biggest, baddest dog on the block. Now we just care about what's going on here at home. We care about the economy. We care about other things. Okay, I have to get out of here that quick. All right, hold on. There's the Federal Reserve Board. All right, now I got to blaze through some of this because now I'm sort of running out of time. This presentation was a little longer than I thought. These are charts to watch right now. This is Haitian independence here. This chart basically says that as far as Haiti goes, from January 1st of 1904, it's not 1904, what am I talking about? No, it's not. Haitian independence was further back than that, wasn't it? That's right. Okay, 1804. I'm so sorry. What all four of these charts mean right here, if you look at the United States on the Sibley chart, this is for July 4th. If you look at Greece, if you look at Haiti, and if you look at Sweden, it looks like all four of these charts are heading for big major trouble and massive economic collapse. Haiti's already there. Haiti's becoming basically a protectorate of the United States because they're sitting on a bunch of oil. So the oil companies decided to basically rig up a massive earthquake, a 7.1 that wasn't even felt on the other side of the island, that doesn't create a tsunami. They hold back all the humanitarian aid so the U.S. military can be the first on the scene. Now they're shipping literally C-130 Hercules airplane loads of Haitians into Colorado and the center part of the United States. So they're transporting all the Haitians that are sitting on their oil, they're transporting here to the United States. But if Venezuela is a champagne glass of oil, then Haiti is a swimming pool full of oil. So we're basically just going to make Haiti a protectorate. Greece, you can pretty much kiss their democracy goodbye because now they're begging the European Union for all kinds of money. Sweden, same thing. The whole social system in Sweden, which is the model for the rest of the world and is the model that Barack Obama wants to actually institute here in the United States, Sweden's bankrupt thanks to that. You know why they're bankrupt? Illegal immigration. Because a bunch of people came in, they're not working, they're not actually supporting the system. I got to be out of here like in 5 minutes. They're not supporting the system. Meanwhile, the United States. This is a bankruptcy chart for the United States right now. And the bankruptcy, again, is repeating certain things that happened with the United States Bank and the central bank in the 1840s, but we do not have Andrew Jackson leading the nation like we did. And again, as you saw from Obama's chart, he may be a great idea guy and a great inspirational leader, but this guy doesn't know jack about economics. I mean, every economic decision this guy's going to make is going to dismally fail. So let me just blaze through a couple of these things. I read that earlier, so I'm not even going to do this. I can't even read this because I don't have time. I promised you I would show you guys this. This is the spiral over Norway that happened on December 9th. This was the day before Obama actually got his Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway. I think that this is some kind, you see the tube weapon here and here? I think this is some kind of toroid tube weapon that was actually creating some kind of black hole area sphere here because weather patterns begin to change, magnetic fields begin to change. At approximately this time is when the massive magnetic plume actually jammed the poles a certain way. It may also be a demonstration by the Rockefeller gang to show that, Barack Obama, you ain't sliced bread and a six-pack of beer. You ain't all that. This is a demonstration of our power before Obama actually goes there and makes a speech. Now, here's what's weird, because then, at approximately the same time, on December 9th, incorrectly reported to be the 18th, this weird pyramid shape appears over Moscow for the better part of 2 days. Now it's interesting because here you have a Rockefeller symbol of the circle and the 0-point energy, a demonstration of it, and here you have a Rothschild symbol of the capstone of the Great Pyramid of Giza flying over Moscow. Here's what's even freakier. Here's the same object, except a little earlier in the year. This is April 19th, actually, earlier in the year. You see the capstone on the top of the pyramid here? This is the exact dimensions here, this object, of a flying object that should fit on the top of the Great Pyramid. Don't you think that's interesting? Because the Great Pyramid, the capstone of the pyramid, returning to the Great Pyramid, represents the return of the Messiah. Because I am the chief cornerstone, the builders rejected, this is a chief cornerstone. And so I promised I'd show you guys that. I might actually be running out of time here because I've got somebody else actually behind me. Am I out of time now and somebody else is coming in? All right, so here's one last thing, and I'm sorry, I have a bunch more here. I'll wrap this up, but if you guys come tomorrow, I'll try to show the rest of this and see what's going on. You guys okay? Did you learn a lot of stuff? All right, okay, all right. Just one last thing to wrap this up. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and this shows you the grand plan of everything that's going on. 2623 is the fall of man going down in here to the pit. Down here begins 1914, and 2004 represents humanity falling into this hole. However, the ascended folks, in other words, all of you, the elect, are moving upwards on the upward path. Here is this is Moses here, leading the children out of Israel, establishing a new covenant, a new law that's based on individuality. Here's Buddha. So here's Moses giving us the law. Here's Buddha, restricted path of physical endeavor that shows us that enlightenment is within. And this area right here represents Christ. And Christ's concept of forgiveness of sin, of forgiveness of debt, and this is actually what's known as the Christ angle here, then leads to a 2,000-year era of the path of the disincarnated, fully enlightened. It means for 2,000 years, all of you got to learn and grow with all the ascended masters and all the angels, but now, with the beginning of the 20th century, it's universal reincarnation. Everybody who has ever lived has to be back now for the final exam, which is why you're going to have 7 billion people on the planet. Everybody comes in here, and there's a period of time between 1999 and 2039 where there's a great exodus that occurs, where a lot of people are going to be checking out. And right here is actually where the next messianic figure incarnates. And she, I believe, is known as the Emmanuela, a female incarnation of the Christ or the Christos or the feminine aspect of Quetzalcoatl, incarnates sometime between 2034 and 2039. There's peace on earth. There's technology used for the greatest good. Everybody works for the greatest and highest good of all mankind, and we all live happily ever after. The end. Thanks for coming. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Well done.